So our entire vote system is secured in a locked room. They require security key card access. Any part of the process is always monitored by 2 staff members, and it's constantly under video surveillance.
We have cameras set up all over the vote by mail room with angles hitting every spot. Also, there's an alarm system. So in order to, in the morning when we enter, we have a code that we put in before we come in. Also, there always has to be 2 people in the room. So not just one person can come in and, nobody else is in here. There's always 2 people, and again, the cameras are everywhere. So it's very secure.
So the ballot tally room is a secure room where we keep our ballot counting machines. It has a security key access. We also log all access to that room. We always have at least 2 people in there whenever we're doing any sort of process with the ballots. And that's where we actually process all ballots that are being counted, as well as get reporting for the ballots on election night. And all activity in the ballot tally room is monitored by 24-hour surveillance. So our entire vote counting system is a standalone system. No part of it is ever connected to the internet. So prior to the processing of any ballots, we do a clean install of the software that actually counts the ballots, and this is an install from a trusted build sent to us by the Secretary of State's office. So the Secretary of State has really put into place very stringent rules to be followed when using the vote system. And we follow those here at Kern County to the letter to make sure that everything is processed securely and correctly. So all of the equipment has gone through stringent federal certification, as well as the even more stringent state of California certification for election vote systems. We invite the auditor staff to come in to audit the system before every election. So this is a public accessible audit. The public is invited to come down. We also invite the grand jury. At random, the auditor's office will select precincts that are a part of the election. We give them a set number of test ballots. They mark those however they see fit. We run them through the system, also testing the accessible devices. We then run all of those marked ballots through the system to make sure that they are read correctly. Technology is constantly changing, but between the Secretary of State and us here with Kern County, we're staying on top of election systems. So.
Once a registration form is received and it's checked for completeness, the data is run through our California statewide database, and that information is run automatically through the DMV and Social Security databases to verify that the person registering is in fact a person. If the information doesn't match the DMV and Social Security databases, you may be asked to show your ID the first time you vote. It's very likely that the person registered at your address prior to you living there did not notify the post office of a forwarding address. If this is the case, you can mark return to sender on the mail and send it back to us. Because if you don't send it back, the person does not re-register, or we're not notified in any way, there's no way for us to know that this person no longer lives there. This can happen by name changes, by a voter using a nickname instead of their full name, or by birth date or ID information being written incorrectly. And there are systems in place at both the county and the state level to identify and resolve these duplicates prior to Election Day. It can't just be fixed over the phone, because not only do we need your name change, but we need a new signature to match your new name change on file for Election Day. The law actually requires us to have a matching new signature to match your name change that you're trying to submit. We do get monthly notifications to change and update addresses. However, if the information that we're getting doesn't match what we have on file, or if you're providing a mailing or a business address, we cannot use those to update your residence. We will attempt to send you a new registration or address update form so that we can get an updated residence address. Jury Duty Services receives their reports from two different places. The first being elections, which could mean that you have not updated your registration information with us. The second being DMV. At this point, you would need to find out which entity doesn't have the correct information and correct it. The name should match exactly. Otherwise, you will receive multiple jury summons. If you do not want to associate yourself or belong to a political party, when you're registering to vote, you would actually mark the box that says no party preference. So if you don't want to be affiliated with any political party, the correct choice would be no party preference. When you register to vote, if you're registering to vote no party preference, the only time this is going to affect you is during a presidential primary. And that's because the presidential candidate races are each listed by political party. So if you're not associated with the political party, you will not be permitted to vote for a party's president candidate. However, there are some political parties who will allow you to cross over into that political party for that election only and vote on a presidential candidate. And those are each determined at election time, on every different election. We're not able to take someone off for having dementia or Alzheimer's, and you cannot remove them with power of attorney because you having power of attorney does not remove somebody's right to vote unless you have a court-ordered conservatorship stating that they are no longer able to vote. We would just get an updated signature request form with the voter's mark and a witness by signature. A mark can be anything that they use to identify a signature, an X, sometimes it can just be a squiggle, it's whatever they can do, and a witness by signature.
Vote by mail is very important because it's a very convenient way for voters to be able to vote. There's voters that aren't able to make it to the polls on election day, and voting by mail gives them the opportunity to still vote. They have more time to do it as well. They can do it from the comfort of their own home, and they can make their voice heard by casting their votes that way.
You can mail them back to us. You can come and drop them off in person. You can drop them off at any poll site on election day. We usually will also provide a curbside drop-off for voters on election day, and then usually the Saturday before the election, we also provide a curbside drop-box location outside our office. They have to be postmarked on or before election day, and as long as we receive them within 3 days following election day, they will be accepted. So the vote by mail processing room is where we handle and process all the vote by mail ballots. They're kept in our vote by mail processing room at all times, other than when they're taken to the count room to be tallied. It is a secure room that's secured by an alarm system. It has 7 security cameras in it that monitor every area of the room. There is also access badge entry that only authorized personnel are allowed to have.
So from the moment we receive our ballots, the whole process involves checks and balances to make sure that we reconcile throughout the process. So we get the ballots in the mail.
They come in, and the first thing that we do is put them through our mail sorter. That captures the image that is on the return envelope.
And that's the data that we use to compare to what we have on our elections information management system. So our elections information management system is basically the heart of what we do. That's where we have all of our voter information, all of our precincts, all of our street indexes. It's a program that we use, and that's where all our information is stored. And that's how we are able to signature check, is because we have a record of every voter. We have their signature based on the registration form that they have filled out. So that's how we're able to compare signatures when we do our signature checking for the ballots.
There's a box on the return envelope where the voters are required to sign. When it runs through the machine, it will capture that image, allowing the staff members to be able to verify the signatures on the envelope to make sure that the signatures match what the voter has on their registration file. So staff members that conduct signature verification have gone through a signature comparison training course that taught us how to identify similarities and differences and styles of signatures. As long as it matches and it's signed, it's accepted.
Basically, that's how we validate a ballot. If it doesn't match, then we call it a challenge, and that's when the signature doesn't match, or there's, the person's deceased, or whatever the case may be.
So if a signature doesn't match, it's reviewed by several staff members. And then when it gets to the point to where we determine that it just doesn't match, then we will send a notice to the voter, giving them the opportunity to correct it so that we can count their vote.
We tell them that it needs to match what we have on our registration system. Once we do our signature checking, then we have to run the ballots again through the mail sorter to make sure that we get all the ballots that we accepted and made good based on the signature checking. Those get put into smaller groups, and then we run them one more time so that they go into their own individual precincts. The mail sorter puts them into precincts during the last time that it goes through the sorter. Once we are at that stage, then we are able to import the information into our election logs, and it tells us how many ballots are supposed to be in every precinct. So when we're opening, we have our log sheets that tell you this precinct has this many ballots. So throughout the whole process, we know, if we're off at any time, we know, and we're able to correct that. So we don't send the ballots out to the count room until everything matches on each end. So again, there's that checking and reconciling, making sure that when you're opening, you have to have, if it says you have 100 ballots, you have to make sure that that's what you actually physically have. So it's that checking throughout the whole process.
So opening of ballots is done in stations of 2 to 4 staff members. They will remove the ballot from the envelope, always being sure to keep the voter's information faced away from them to protect voters' privacy.
So the person who's opening and extracting the ballots never sees the names.
The envelopes go one way and then the ballots go another. There's no way to identify a specific ballot to a voter. And then each ballot is visually checked for any damage that might prevent it from going through our scanners. If there's a damaged ballot, meaning that there's tears in the ballot or markings in the timeline, those ballots are unable to go through our scanners. So we have a duplication board, which is a team of 4 staff members. They will duplicate the markings on the damaged ballot and mark them on a fresh, clean ballot. Each ballot, the original one and the duplicated one, is then serial stamped. This helps to create our audit trail. And then the original ballot is voided to clearly identify that ballot is not to be counted. And then the fresh, clean, duplicated ballot is the one that goes through to the tally room to be counted.
So we are comparing constantly what we have on the sorter, what we have on the elections information management system. Our election logs program helps us compare that as we go. Reconciliation is very important to make sure that that we don't count something that shouldn't have been counted, to make sure that, you know, something doesn't go through, or to make sure that everything that we sent through the mail sorter actually goes to the counting room. So it's very important that we reconcile throughout the whole process. Vote by mail starts 29 days before the election, so that's when we send out the ballots.
We start opening ballots 10 business days before the election, at which point ballots will go through our scanners.
Of course, they can't put out any results, so they're just processing and put the results out on election day at 8 p.m.
So our accessible ballot marking device provides a lot of different accessible tools for voters that might want to use those. Increased contrast, larger font, audio ballot features. It has a lot of different accessible features for those voters that might like to use them. When we complete our configuration here, we place the security seals and log those seals. We send out those logs to the poll sites, and a poll worker is able to verify those logs against the seals that are on the accessible device to make sure that there's no tampering that's taking place. The accessible ballot marking device can be thought of as a digital marker, basically. So it's a giant touchscreen that has accessible features. So a voter is able to make their selections, their vote selections on there. What's important to understand about the accessible ballot devices is that they don't actually count any votes. So the accessible ballot marking device is just that. It marks a paper ballot. The ballot marking device contains no record of any selections that they made. It simply records the selections they make onto a paper ballot. They're able to print out the ballot to an attached printer. They can verify their choices and make sure that all the choices that they made are correct. And then they can actually take that ballot and drop it in the ballot box. And that ballot is not counted until it comes into the office and we count it through our machines here. Basically, every person who votes at Kern County is voting on a paper ballot. So even the thought that it's a digital device, all it's doing is recording onto a paper ballot that we're counting just like every other paper ballot here at the county. So at the close of polls, the locked ballot box is opened by the poll workers. There's always at least 2 people with the ballots at all times. They reconcile the ballots at that poll site.
Well, the reconciliation at the poll sites, that is the initial starting point for being able to reconcile anything that we do for each precinct in the election.
Then they place ballots into a transport box that is sealed and signed by at least 4 poll workers, at which point they're transported here. So even in transport, there's still at least 2 election officials with those ballots as they're transported here to the office. And we verify that the seal is still intact here before they're opened. And anytime any ballots are handled here at the office, there's always at least 2 staff with them. All ballots are brought back to the site on election night, but we do have, Kern County is a large county, so it can take quite a while for some of the outlying areas, some of the farther poll sites to get into the elections office because all ballot tabulation is done here at the county building.
The election results on election night are not final. They're simply a snapshot in time of that night. The law allows counties 30 days to complete the hard work of counting ballots and ensuring the integrity of the election results.
Current law allows us to start processing mail ballots 10 business days before the day of the election.
Tallying the votes. That's done in our count room, which is secured with 3 security cameras, and it is also accessible through badge entry only with authorized personnel. And then there's also a log in and out chart. So anytime you enter or leave that room, you have to log in and out. In the count room, the ballots will run through optical scanners to tally the votes. Anytime there's mismarkings on the ballot, such as a voter bubbled in more than they wanted and maybe marked one out, there's a process called adjudication, which those ballot images will go into a file and then be reviewed by staff members to determine the markings on the ballot. All vote by mail ballots that we receive that are eligible and verified are all counted. And at 8 p.m. on election night, the first results that you see are all of the vote by mail ballots that we received and were able to process before election day.
Election night, what you're going to see is the vote by mail ballots that have already been turned into our office prior to election day, mail ballots that have been turned in. And election night, you're going to see those ballots as well as polling place ballots that were returned to our office that night.
Come 8 o'clock, we can do an election report of those ballots that have already been tabulated. The exception being if people are still voting here at the elections office. Until everyone has completed voting and the polls have been closed, we can't actually release any election results. So if there's a little bit of a delay after 8 o'clock, sometimes we are not able to post election results immediately. We can't post any sort of election results because we don't want to influence any voters that are still in the middle of trying to complete their ballot. So as ballots come in from poll sites, we're able to add those to the results reports that we put out. We try to do that at least every 2 hours, sooner if we can, if we're able to. And we continue that process until we've counted all of the ballots that come in from elections.
The canvass is a process and to ensure the integrity of the election results. The canvass is after the election. It's a 30-day process in which we have to count the ballots, verify everyone's eligibility to vote, and then certify the results. This is an open process. We publish and we post the canvass period. Actually, we publish and post that you're welcome to come watch us count leading up to the election. Once we start the election, 29 days before, you can come and watch us. You could come watch us every day if you like. We do have people, observers, that come watch us process ballots. They come before the election and after the election. You'll have campaign managers, candidates, just the general public, grand jury. They'll come and sit and watch us to make sure we're following through and processing every eligible ballot. There's various steps that begin the day after the election. And we start doing the vote history, vote by mail ballots, processing of provisional ballots, reconciliation, 1% adjudication, verifying that every vote that's been cast is eligible. And all those processes have to be completed before we can certify the results. Certification process is completing all the steps as outlined by Elections Code. Everybody goes through the same certification process, really, because it's defined in code. Well, it's elections law. And in certifying the results, it's really just a certificate being issued saying, these are our counts, we certify this is true and correct, and we upload our statement of vote and to Secretary of State's office. For an election, you do give a certificate. You give a certificate to the state showing that the results were true and correct, and you also give a certificate to every candidate showing that they were elected and they get an oath in office. During the canvass, you have the vote by mail ballots. All vote by mail ballots are scanned and signature checked that are returned into the polls. They're verifying to make sure that they didn't vote anywhere else, that they didn't return their vote by mail ballot and then go to a polling place and also vote. Same with provisionals. Provisionals are being researched to determine where they registered to start with, did they have the right to vote, were they at the right poll site.
So, one of the first canvass activities after vote by mail ballots have been counted is to apply vote history, which essentially means we mark in our system whether you have voted or not. This will prevent voters from voting twice as we get to the provisional process.
People can attempt to vote twice, but with the safeguards that we have in place, our system prevents that. Due to entering in vote history, processing provisionals, vote by mail, the system only allows you to return one valid ballot. So you can only return one good ballot. So if you cast a provisional ballot and you go to a poll site and try to cast another ballot, It's not going to happen. The system only allows you to return one valid ballot. And anyone that attempts to vote more than once is sent to the district attorney's office for prosecution. More and more people are voting by mail.
Most people actually, we receive the majority of our vote by mail ballots on election night via dropped off at the poll sites. And honestly, it does make it it makes it difficult on us processing that large amount in the limited amount of time we have after election day to get them processed.
What I tell the public is we send out, say we send out 200,000 vote by mail ballots, and we've only gotten 100,000 back. So the other 100,000 have been dropped off at a poll site, and they're going to be returned. We have to verify those ballots that they didn't vote somewhere else. They didn't vote at a poll site. They didn't vote provisional. We have to check the signatures. We have to process them. We have to do all the same steps we've been doing prior to election on those vote by mail ballots due to the sheer volume. Provisional ballots require more attention, more research. We have to verify the provisional ballots. We have to check that the voter's registered, that they did not cast a ballot anywhere else, they did not cast a vote by mail ballot or go to a polling place and vote. And it's time consuming. The public's welcome to come watch us. The steps we're doing after the election are the same steps we're doing prior to the election. But like I said, more and more people are waiting up until election day to turn in those ballots to make a decision on how they choose to vote. More than half of the ballots we mail out are being held and turned in on election day. Recent law changes, we can accept ballots now that are postmarked election night. We can accept them up through Friday, 3 days after the election. Also, ballots that are unsigned, voters have the opportunity to come in and sign those ballots so that they'll be counted. It does take us the full 30 days to process. We want every eligible voter to be able to cast their ballot.
People might have to vote a provisional ballot, usually because they have gone to the poll site and they are a vote by mail voter and they do not have their vote by mail ballot to surrender. They are not on the voter roll because they have not re-registered at their new address, or they could possibly be at the wrong poll site. That is absolutely not true. Once we determine voter eligibility, we count every single ballot, and provisionals are not an exception. Once the provisional ballot gets to our office, we check it against vote history, and we determine whether the voter is eligible by signature, the information filled out on the envelope, and whether they're at the correct poll site, what they're actually eligible to vote on, and then we count it. They take so long because we have to verify every single one individually, and it's a lot of information. Not only are we checking to make sure that you're voting on the correct contest for where you live, but also the information on the envelope. We're verifying the signature. So the more complete and thorough our envelope is, the quicker we can get it done. Primarily, it would be if the envelope, the provisional envelope, is not filled out in its entirety. We're not able to verify your signature. Also, if you are not a registered voter in our system, or if we've determined that you've already voted. You can ensure that you are registered correctly prior to election day by making sure you're registered at the correct address, as well as having a valid signature on file. You can make sure you're at the correct poll site by checking your sample ballot, also going online and checking and making sure you're at the correct poll site. And you can also, if you're a vote by mail voter, make sure that you're voting the ballot that we send you so that you're not showing up at the poll site without your vote by mail ballot. We send out vote by mail ballots approximately 25 days prior to the election.
Reconciliation is important to the election process because it is our proof that every valid ballot that was cast by an eligible voter was counted.
So we have 30 days after the election to certify. So reconciliation needs to be done, before then.
During the reconciliation process, we also do the 1%, and the 1% is of precincts and batches. 1% is the percentage required of a hand tally of the vote by mail, provisionals, and ballots cast at a poll site. So we pull 1% of the precincts and do a hand tally on those ballots.
Ping pong balls, actually, of all things. We don't use like a digital random number generator. We actually get somebody outside of our department will actually reach into a different series of ping pong balls that match up to another script of precincts. So what we do is we randomly select 1% of all the voting precincts, and then for each of those precincts, and for all of the races for each of those precincts, we actually manually tally those votes. And then we verify that those votes match the reported votes from the system to make sure that everything is counted.
What that's verifying is it's a hand tally that we're comparing to what the computers processed and counted. We want to make sure that there's a check and balance and that they did balance, that you take a batch and you get 5 votes. Did the machine count 5 votes?
So we can actually verify that there was no sort of odd reading or that there was no hiccup with the election system. So even though we have confidence that the system is handling everything correctly, we still go back through and check that the technical processes and make sure that everything is being read with 100% confidence. The adjudication process overall is done on a secured computer system. So it's actually brought up on a computer screen where 2 individuals are able to look at that digital image and make sure that the selections that the system read match the marks that are made on that ballot. If the mark isn't as clearly defined as the instructions state on the ballot, it can be brought over to adjudication. So the improvements in technology that we use here at the county have really allowed us to really ensure the accuracy of the count here in the elections office. This process is much enhanced in that we're able to look at the digital image of the ballot, but we don't make any sort of physical changes to it. So write-ins are actually a component of our adjudication process. So all write-ins are actually pulled up as part of adjudication, where our 2-person team is able to read the write-in selections that are made and then mark a qualified write-in if a qualified write-in has been written on the ballot. So certain races allow for write-in candidates. So a qualified write-in candidate is someone who has filed the paperwork to actually be counted as a write-in for a specific race. Those are the only votes that are actually counted. So we get a lot of sort of novelty write-ins, people writing in their own name, people writing in Mickey Mouse. None of those write-ins actually count because they're not qualified write-ins, because there's a lot of paperwork that's involved for people who actually want to be counted for a specific race. So this system is very efficient, but that does eat up a lot of time when we get a lot of unqualified write-in names written into the write-in section. We have a drop-down selection of every qualified write-in for a specific race, and so that we can look at the name that's written on the ballot, check the drop-down and see if that name exists for the qualified write-ins and make that selection immediately so that the system can recognize that.
Adjudication can be very time-consuming. It's a lot of work. It's a huge volume of work, and there's a lot of demands on you to finish up, which is hard. You can't rush through the process. You have to take your time, be methodical. You want it to be correct. That's our job, is to make sure the election results are correct. The canvass is important to make sure that every voter's ballot if eligible, is counted. We can't certify until we're positive we've completed the steps, we've ensured everyone that had the right to vote has ballots been counted. It's a necessary and important step that we take seriously. Our job is to ensure that if you're an eligible voter, your ballot was counted. You had the right to vote. So the canvas is important because we want to make sure that everyone's ballot was counted and counted accurately.
Knowing exactly how many ballots were cast for every single precinct, for every single process, and knowing that everything that we got sent actually went through and was counted, that is the integrity of our vote.
We have different teams doing different things, but it all just, at the end, we're just little puzzle pieces to the big picture, and it's amazing when you get to see the big picture and to know that you were a part of it.